Hi, everyone. Amy Goyer here, your moderator of the AARP Family Caregivers Discussion Group on Facebook, and I also serve as AARP's Family and Caregiving Expert. Welcome to our chat. I'm very glad that you're with us today. If you're watching in the AARP Family Caregivers Discussion Group, thank you for joining us. And if you're watching elsewhere, thank you also for joining us. And if you're not already a member of the group, please do join us on Facebook. The link is below. And while we're here, throughout our comment, I would love for you to post comments, questions, thoughts in the comments section below, and we'll try to get back with you. We will also be posting helpful links so that you can follow them directly to important resources. Today, we are discussing something really, really important. We have a topic that is one that affects many, many family caregivers. And it is something that I personally don't have a lot of experience with. But we have some wonderful guests today to share that with you. And our topic is Parkinson's disease, what no one tells you and what you should know. So we want to bring insight and hope and support for all of you who are Parkinson's caregivers or who may be in the future. I have very special guests today, Dr. Barbara Leffler and Dr. Sneha Mantri. I'm going to give you a little background on them. Dr. Barbara Leffler is the care partner to Gary, her husband of 57 years and the love of her life. He is a Vietnam veteran exposed to Agent Orange, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2017. Dr. Leffler is an ambassador with the Parkinson's Foundation and is a member of the foundation's People with Parkinson's Advisory Council. And she is a retired clinical psychologist and advanced practice nurse. She loves health teaching and empowering others, and her work with the foundation has given her many opportunities to do this. We're so grateful that you're here with us today, Barbara. I gotta fix my screen there. Hi. So thank you so much for being with us, Barbara. And we'll get into a little bit more about your story in a little while.
Thank you.
Our other guest is Dr. Mantri, who is the Chief Medical Officer of the Parkinson's Foundation. She has a deep commitment to improving care and advancing research and centering the voices of people living with Parkinson's. She is an associate professor of neurology at Duke University and a nationally recognized leader in interprofessional care, health equity, and narrative medicine. Throughout her career, Dr. Mantri has remained grounded in the stories of her patients and is passionate about helping them achieve what matters most. I love this storytelling approach to care, Dr. Mantri. Thank you so much for your work in that area and in supporting Parkinson's people who are living with Parkinson's and their caregivers.
Thank you for having us both on this conversation. I'm really looking forward to sharing, with all of the people listening.
Absolutely. So let's start first with you, Dr. Mantri. Very glad to get this conversation started by first defining exactly what is Parkinson's disease and what are the early warning signs.
Yeah, so Parkinson's disease is classified as something called a movement disorder. So you may see that term in, writings and in other online spaces around Parkinson's. And the reason why we call it a movement disorder is because the way we make a diagnosis of Parkinson's is largely based on how people are moving through space. So things like tremor or slowness or stiffness or changes in walking, those are the things that as a neurologist I'm looking for in a patient when I'm considering, is this Parkinson's disease? I think it's also important to recognize that Parkinson's, even though it's called a movement disorder, is much more than just a movement disorder. And a lot of people if you ask them, are really most affected by what we call non-motor symptoms. Things like changes in sleep habits, or mood changes, or cognitive changes, issues with thinking and memory and multitasking. And so, it's important, I think, for people with Parkinson's, for care partners and family members of those with Parkinson's, to recognize that it's all part of the same disease. I sometimes think about it as almost like a constellation with different stars in that constellation. And sometimes one star might shine more brightly than another. And so, my job as a neurologist is to help people sort of even out not just the physical motor symptoms, but also pay attention to some of these non-motor aspects of the disease.
That's very, very helpful. I think we think so much about Parkinson's in terms of the movement disorder, but there are other things as well. Barbara, you were going to add something?
No.
I know you know an awful lot about Parkinson's disease, both from your professional work and your personal work. You have such a wealth of both. Can you tell us a little bit about your caregiving story and what have been your biggest challenges?
Sure, I'd love to. And thank you so much, Amy. In thinking about my caregiving journey, it occurred to me that it's been in phases. The first phase was the diagnosis. And like many people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, the symptoms may appear years before that are undiagnosed. And that same thing happened with Gary. And finally, he had so many symptoms, a long list. And I said, please talk with your PCP about this when you go in. And he finally said yes. And when he did, he was referred to a movement disorder specialist. When we received the diagnosis, it was abrupt, it was unsupportive, and it was jarring. Even though I suspected it was jarring. We were lost. And on top of it, Gary didn't want to talk about it with anyone, and he did not want me to talk about it with anyone, which is not uncommon. And that was a tall order for a psychologist, because I like to talk about things. But I knew Gary, I loved Gary, and I trusted that he would come around. And we process information very differently. And I really respected that he needed the time. It was his illness. And he did. And a few painful weeks later, he said, you can talk with your sister and a dear friend, which I did. And the next phase was connecting with resources and support. I would call that phase 2. And we had the good fortune, 6 months after he was diagnosed, of being invited into a program called PB Self-Efficacy. And it was an 8-month program where we met 3 hours a week with 10 other couples who were in the early stages of the illness. And it really saved our lives. We, together, in a very nurturing and supportive environment, we learned about all the aspects of Parkinson's disease, the treatment, how to form your care partner, your care team, and also how to advocate for yourselves. And out of that group, we formed a small support group. There were a number of us who continued on, where we once a month came to each other's houses and spent time together, and we're still very close. So it was a really remarkable experience, and it taught us so much about self-advocacy. Also during that time, we did so much research online, like people do. We read books, we attended webinars, in-person conferences, and these are so available to everybody through the Parkinson's Foundation, Michael J. Fox, Davis Finney, and so forth. And remember the Gary who didn't want me to talk with anyone? Well, 3.5 years ago, we both became ambassadors for the Parkinson's Foundation, which gives us purpose. At one of our volunteer events, a social worker with the VA invited me into the Care Partner program, or the caregiver program with the VA. I didn't think I needed it because I was already in a support group, but I joined. Little did I know how much I was going to rely on it in the future. But at that time, Gary's Parkinson's disease was progressing slowly. He was exercising vigorously and was doing well. That ended abruptly in the fall of 2024 when he was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. We had no idea that this would be the beginning of what I call phase 3, surviving the unexpected. His treatment for the autoimmune disease triggered a long cascade of threatening medical issues, life-threatening medical issues with multiple ER visits, hospitalizations, and emergency surgeries, culminating in a hemorrhage on his spinal cord. This tragically resulted in a spinal cord injury at thoracic level 2. Over the past year, he was hospitalized for 85 days. When he was discharged from the VA spinal cord unit in June, he came home with a colostomy, a Foley catheter, in a beast of a power wheelchair. I was suddenly his full-time caretaker. 6 months later, the Foley catheter and the colostomy are gone. He's graduated to a lightweight, collapsible power wheelchair, which gives us the freedom to travel and resume some of our favorite activities, and our resilience carried us through. Challenges, everything was a challenge. It was huge. I think maintaining our resilience is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with the ongoing grief from the moment of diagnosis, and self-regulation in the emotional roller coaster. And one final thing about that, I really created a holding environment for Gary during all of this. But you know, caregivers need to be held too.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Barbara, for sharing your story. And I'm sure it feels like this is the super condensed version because
Yes.
there are so many ups and downs in any caregiving situation and story. And even just saying he was hospitalized, there's so much to that, each hospitalization and each aspect of that. I heard you mention grief. And I think that's something that we often neglect when we talk about caregiving, because we have grief, even though our loved one is still here. We have ambiguous grief. We have ambiguous loss, and we have anticipatory grief, and all of those things going on. So it sounds like it's been really helpful for you to connect with other family caregivers.
Yes, absolutely. That's been one of the most important things to do. Something I recommend to everyone: connect. You're not alone.
Yes, and the Parkinson's Foundation has some good information on their website, and I'm sharing the link here that I know you've both had a lot to do with, I'm sure, in terms of being practical assistance for caregivers. And we also remind people that our family caregivers discussion group on Facebook is a very helpful resource. We have a lot of Parkinson's caregivers in there. So I urge people also to join us there and find any way that you can connect with other caregivers, right, Barbara?
That's correct. And the Parkinson's Foundation has a wonderful Care Partners Summit in the fall, which is very rich, and all kinds of webinars available for care partners. There's a whole section of the Parkinson's Foundation. Just go on parkinson.org and you can access those. It's really wonderful.
Wonderful. I think that's what keeps us going so often. Dr. Mantri, you heard Barbara's viewpoint as a family caregiver. From your perspective as a clinician, how do you see that, the role that caregivers play in the daily management of Parkinson's and helping their loved ones actually get the most out of their Parkinson's disease treatments?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And thank you, Barbara, for sharing that story. It was really moving for me to hear. And especially, the way that you sort of broke it down for us in terms of like, this is the early stage and what caregiving looks like at that stage, helping to support Gary in his decision to, hold the diagnosis close at first and then, start to share with very trusted others. I think that in itself is such a huge thing that, care partners can do in that early stage, right? Is give the person with Parkinson's the space that they need to process, to be there as a resource for, their loved one, but also, as you said, to remember that you need resources and loved ones of your own and ways to process of your
Mhm.
own. And that's where I think things like the Parkinson's.org Care Partner Corner can be really, really helpful to connect with other care partners at any stage. And then, as you shared, as the disease progressed and different things came up, including things that like the autoimmune condition that were perhaps not directly related to Parkinson's, but certainly makes living with Parkinson's harder in different ways. The way that you and others kind of stepped in and stepped up and helped to support Gary at all of those stages.
Mhm.
The other thing, in addition to grief that I heard in your story was stigma, or the impact of stigma potentially. And I just want to highlight that some of the resources on Parkinson's.org are specifically around helping people with Parkinson's disease and care partners navigate that uncertainty or that stigma, or how to help share the diagnosis with other people.
Mhm.
There's also a lot of work that we've done in something called our Optimizing Care Initiative, which is a way for care partners to help support their loved one with Parkinson's disease at doctor visits or through hospitalizations, through those transitions of care that can be so challenging for so many reasons, and sort of help providing, I see our role as the foundation as helping to provide something of a bridge for family care partners so that you're not trying to corral all of this stuff on your own and you've got someone behind you sort of supporting you. And then, through the helpline as a resource to call, or we now have a chat bot on our website that you can talk to in real time to get, that direct connection with specific resources as needed. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And I encourage everybody to look into it, particularly if you're dealing with specific challenges around care partners or caregiving. And then lastly, I'll just mention the PD Health at Home series. Barbara, you sort of alluded to it, but it's this amazing sort of online webinar series that's been running for several years now. I think we started it, during the pandemic when everything had to shift to virtual very quickly, but we realized that actually helps people connect from, your own living room or from, wherever you keep your computer, and you can tune in for Mindfulness Mondays, Wellness Wednesdays, and Fitness Fridays. And those are like 3 sort of touch points throughout the week that help people with Parkinson's, and specifically for family caregivers and care partners to learn more about what Parkinson's is, and to make the time and to have the space to explore your own grief and loss and the change that happens when someone that you love is diagnosed with PD.
Dr. Mantri, how critical do you think it is that someone with Parkinson's disease have a care partner who is in there with them and going to appointments with them and helping them with their treatments and their physical therapy or their whatever their other therapies and treatments are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for many people, it is really helpful to have that second set of ears or eyes. Not everybody has, one designated person, though, that would be that, whether it's a spouse or partner or sometimes an adult child. So some of my patients have sort of a village around them, if you will, and different people who can help step in at different moments. Close friends, family members, and so on. But the foundation is here for everyone with Parkinson's disease, regardless of what your family situation may be. So we just want to make sure that, in addition to supporting the person who's living with the disease, we're attending to and supporting all of the people around them that are helping that person to thrive. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Barbara, I'm curious because I always say caregiving is a team sport. It's not, it's not meant to be one person, but it's difficult for many of us to see that team or to try and build that team. Who all is on your team?
Wow, we had such a team, and we have such a team. Let me start with one thing that not a lot of people talk about, and that's palliative care.
Mm-hmm.
Palliative care is a resource. It's a layer of support that you can have with you from the time of diagnosis all through your journey of Parkinson's disease. And it's often talked about as something that people have at the end of life, and that isn't true. They can have it then, but that's not the only time. And I wish we had known about palliative care in the beginning, because during the first 6 months, we suffered. And that would have been such a resource for us to have to help us with the suffering. But we did start palliative care 2 years ago, and it's a wonderful support to us. We really look forward to meeting with our movement disorder, who's also meeting with the movement disorder specialist, who's also a palliative care specialist as well. So that's a big one for us.
Yeah.
When Gary was first diagnosed, he started with LSVT Big and Loud, which is a speech therapy and physical therapy specifically for people with Parkinson's disease. And then he continued on with speech and physical therapy as he needs them. And you can't take this journey alone. It's really important to build a care team. You might not see everybody all the time, but it's important that you know they're there when you need them. You may have to ask for it. We certainly did. Not everybody came to us and said, oh, you could do this or you could do that. So we had to do work on our own. The other person who's been so helpful to us is the occupational therapist. And I have to say, the VA occupational therapist has been a saint. We needed a wheelchair lift coming in from our garage to our house before Gary was discharged from the spinal cord unit. She arranged for all of that. We needed a stair glide to go down into the basement so Gary could get to his exercise equipment. She arranged all of that. We had grab bars put in the house, other mobility devices, just amazing. And she was very influential and supportive of our spinal cord rehab. The other thing was the OT and the PT came to our house before Gary was discharged from the SCI to look at our house to see if there were things in the house that might be dangerous for him, if there were other adjustments we needed to make. And they spent a couple hours here, actually brought Gary with them into the house when he was still an inpatient, just to see him get in, see how he could maneuver about, and see what changes we need to make. It was really awesome.
Amazing.
The other thing is mental health providers. You know, I believe in being a psychologist. I believe in psychotherapy, and we have been in couples therapy off and on. We're back in it again. We're both in individual therapy, and it has been a blessing for us. We need all the support that we can get. Another piece of support is something I wish people would have told me about. I told you the story of meeting the social worker from the VA. Even though Gary has been in the VA system, no one told us about the caregiver program. And if I had not run into her at an event where we were having a Parkinson's table, I would have never known about the Care Partner program. And I have really needed it. And so since all of this happened with Gary over the last year, I had been in the Care Partner program for 1 year before that. I had wonderful established relationships with people in the group. We had a book club, we have a writing group, we have other things that we do that are so supportive. If I hadn't known about that from her, I would have been missing a whole layer of support. And there's, within the VA system, there's 2 levels of care partners. There's the general level that everybody is open to. And then if you have really special needs and are needing extra support, there's the comprehensive caregiver program, which actually I was admitted to in the fall because of all that's been going on with Gary. So I now have that extra layer of support, you know, and taking care of myself.
That's wonderful. You know, my dad was a veteran also, by the way, and the VA was very, very helpful to us. But it took me doing a lot of investigating, asking questions. I had the same experience where things weren't actually offered to us. I had to ask about them. But once we got home-based primary care, that was a game changer for us because the OT and the PT were all coordinated by its nurse practitioner and his case manager. And so many of those things can be so helpful. But the caregiver support program, I have the link here on the screen, is such an important point. And I think in hearing you, one of the things that comes across so loud and clear is that our caregiving teams aren't just family. It's all of these folks who support the caregiver, who support the care recipient, who, you know, are the professionals and the services. I imagine you have friends and neighbors who are helpful. You know, all of these things make up that team.
Yes, and we have the most incredible neighborhood. We are truly blessed. When Gary came home, we had a meal train for, I think it was 10 days, and people came over every evening and brought us dinner, and they prepared it in such a special way and presented it to us, and it was a great way for us to see everybody and for Gary to see anybody, because during that big hospitalization, he was gone for 2 months. And you know, people missed him. When he came home from SCI, he came on a wheelchair van, and I came home. I was ahead of the wheelchair van in the car, and I pulled in, and he was met with people in the neighborhood who were out to greet him when he came off of the wheelchair van. It was so very important, and we continue to have the support in our neighborhood. We're really blessed. It's not just neighbors, but very, very close friends here in the neighborhood. The other thing I wanted to mention about the veterans, the Parkinson's Foundation has quarterly webinars for veterans, and they also have a veterans guide. And I have to say, Gary and I attended, this gets back to, you have to ask for things. Gary and I attended the veterans webinar through the Parkinson's Foundation in November. And we were so impressed with all the information that was there. And the social worker in particular went through all the resources, and she'd been working for the VA for a long time. And she delineated so many things that we had to learn on our own through the years. So if there are some of you who are online who are in the VA system and want to learn more about it, go on the Parkinson's website and find that webinar from November. It was really excellent.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I think the more resources we have, you know, as caregivers, we're always busy and we may not see something the first time, but we can go back and listen and watch and try to gain as much as we can. I think one of the things that I'm hearing from you is, you know, Gary's gone through several different phases already in his treatments. New things are coming up. Dr. Mantri, are there any new treatments on the horizon that you see coming up in the future?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I think that are currently in clinical trials at various levels that I feel, you know, cautiously optimistic about, I would say. I think one sort of group of upcoming treatments are trying to target the various common genetic forms of Parkinson's disease. Not everybody with Parkinson's disease has a genetic link, but you know, somewhere in the 12 to 15% of people do have an identified gene that is related to their Parkinson's disease. And even of the people who don't maybe share that gene variant, the downstream consequences of, you know, various gene changes could contribute to Parkinson's risk and Parkinson's progression. And so there's a whole class of medicines that are being tested to either address things at the gene level or at the level of the proteins that come out of those genes, and trying to dial up or dial down various protein levels to try and reduce progression in Parkinson's, or even prevent Parkinson's in people who are at particularly high risk. Those are all in very, very early phase trials right now. So it'll be a little while before we kind of get the results out of that. But it does make me really hopeful that we can develop treatments that are really targeted at the underlying core problems in Parkinson's. And then the other areas of treatments that I'm really excited about that are, I think, much farther along are, as Barbara alluded to, some of these mental health services and opportunities to think about not just the physical symptoms of Parkinson's, but doing a better job and helping us as clinicians do a better job in supporting people's mood, people's anxiety, sleep changes in Parkinson's, and all of these other components that we know have a big impact on people's quality of life. But historically, for the last 50 years, weren't getting the attention that they deserve. So I think there's been a really renewed research focus on more effective treatments around these non-motor symptoms that are so common and such big drivers of quality of life, both for the person with Parkinson's and often for their care partner. If one spouse is not sleeping well, the other spouse probably isn't sleeping well, and so on. And so, those kind of are the two big classes of upcoming treatments that I'm hopeful will help us, care for people better.
Oh, thank you for giving us some hope. I mean, it's always so important to know that they're still working out there. The scientists and the researchers are still working on learning more about the disease and coming up with new treatments. And I love what you said about some of these symptoms of Parkinson's, focusing on those things such as sleep and some of the other issues, because that's the day-to-day life, isn't it, Barbara?
It is. And most of Gary's symptoms have been non-motor symptoms. He's had problems with constipation, which is very common. He has had problems with depression and some anxiety. And so those are things that people don't see. The typical symptom that people talk about is a tremor, and he doesn't have much of a tremor. He does when he's stressed. You can see it in his hand or in his head, but that's not his predominant symptom. So I think educating people about those other symptoms is so important. They're the silent ones, but they're not any less troublesome to the people that have them. One other resource that I wanted to mention, if I may, was so important to us, and it goes back to all those days that Gary was in the hospital. 85 days in the hospital meant 85 days of unrelenting advocacy on my part and using the hospital safety guide. And I have to say, the hospital safety guide is one of the greatest things, in my opinion, that the Parkinson's Foundation does. I had a pile of those in my pack all the time when he was in the hospital. He had one on his bedside table. I gave them out to the nurses at the nurses' stations. When he was going into surgery, I had one with us in the pre-op. I tore out the forms from there for health professionals and said, are you familiar with the issues around anesthesia for people with Parkinson's disease? And I have to tell you, even as a professional, this is not easy to do. It's not easy to tear these things out and take into pre-op a hospital safety guide and say to the anesthesiologist, here, I wanted to give this to you. Are you familiar with the contraindications for people with Parkinson's? But I did it again and again and again. And two memorable things happen. And so I'm sharing this because I think it will give caregivers permission to do this. Before Gary's emergency surgery on Christmas of last year, I took the guide in, I brought it out, his anesthesiologist was there, and I said, I don't know if you're familiar with the Parkinson's Foundation Hospital Safety Guide. She goes, oh, I've been wanting one of those. And so I handed it to her and I said, and I'll tell you how to get more. And so I gave her that information. She said, oh yeah, I want this for my students. So that was awesome. And then the last surgery Gary had, did the same thing. And the person who was in charge, the anesthesiologist in charge, took this, and I was talking to him and someone else said, shh, and I'm talking to him quietly on the side, and he posted the information and the contraindications on their internal website for everybody to see. So they really want this information, even though you may feel timid about sharing it. And the other thing is you have to share it again and again and again. And it didn't matter how many days Gary was in the hospital, there was always something that came up. When he had colostomy reversal surgery in the fall, and it was the second last day that he was in the hospital. Someone wanted to prescribe a medication for him. And I looked at the list and I said, it's contraindicated. So even up until then, he's getting ready to come home and I'm still looking at the list. So it's an amazing, amazing resource.
And that can be found where?
That can be found on Parkinson.org. You can download it and you can also order a free copy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really, really wonderful resource, Barbara. Thank you for highlighting it. And I'm glad to hear that it got such a fantastic reception from the staff there. I mean, you're right that often with staff turnover and shift work and stuff on the inpatient side of things, you have to keep giving out those cards and giving out those, have that brochure kind of like at the ready to turn to for people. But it's so encouraging to hear that, number one, the word has gotten out. People want copies of this, that, you know, anesthesiologist who posted it on the intranet at his workplace. That way it's educating so many more people, because quite honestly, unfortunately, not a whole lot of health professionals get very much training in Parkinson's disease, unless you're a neurologist or a movement disorder specialist, or, for example, a physical therapist who's done the extra training for the LSVT big program. Your average, you know, doctor or nurse has had maybe 1 hour, maybe half an hour of lecture in Parkinson's disease over the course of their whole training. And so it's really, really important to help educate the doctors and the clinicians to make sure that they understand, you know, your loved one's specific situation, but also in general for people with Parkinson's disease, these medicines are not great, or these, you know, these are strategies to help people when they're having trouble with particular symptoms with Parkinson's. So the hospital safety guide is a really great opportunity to kind of bring all of that together in one space, in a, you know, easily portable, easy to hand out way. So I'm glad to hear.
And we will post a link to that in the comments, so directly to that. You know, we're talking about being an advocate, and I think that's one of the most critical roles that as care partners we play. I am wondering, Barbara, what you do to advocate for yourself. How do you take care of yourself through this caregiving experience?
You know, that's a work in progress. You know,
for all of us,
it's a forever thing. I get massages, I get acupuncture, I do meditation, and I think something that's been most important for both of us, Gary and me, but staying in the present moment as much as you can. And it sounds so easy, but it's not. But it's when you're able to do that, it's so helpful. And for me, doing the things I think I cannot do, that's one of the things, saying from Eleanor Roosevelt that sticks in my mind: do the things you think you cannot do. But doing the things I thought I couldn't do, one step at a time, one step at a time. And rest. You know, in the hardest of times, either when he was in the hospital or when he first came home, at the end of the day, I was so tired. And neighbors would invite me over for dinner or a glass of wine. And sometimes I would go, but a lot of times I wouldn't, because I was too tired. And all I wanted to do was rest. I'd sit in the garden and listen to the birds and drink a big glass of water because I was so dehydrated from being in the hospital. Sometimes I would just collapse in bed. But I've been really reflecting on rest a lot, because it's something that I know that I need. There's so many different kinds of rest, aren't there? I mean, it's like reading a book or listening to music. It can be sleep. It can be just laying down and doing nothing. But
resting your mind.
But resting your mind, or getting rest away from the things that are so stressful. We recently had in our VA support group an opportunity to get together and make journals. And it was a long process. One of the daughters of one of the people in the group came, and she's very crafty, and she taught us how to make books. And over a period of 4 hours, we made these wonderful journals. And excuse me. And in that period of time, we didn't think about anything else. In fact, we remarked about it. In all this time, I didn't think about what I need to do for him or what I need to, and it was a way of resting in a way that I hadn't thought of before, but we all felt it. We all remarked about it at the end of this time. We had lunch together there, and we were just in the moment with what we were doing. The other thing that I haven't used, but that is a really important resource for care partners, but I have it at when I need it, is respite care. Is having somebody to be able to come in and be here so I can do other things. You know, it may change in the future, but right now I'm not able to leave Gary overnight. And that may change at some point in the future, but for right now, I can't. So there is respite care available where he would go someplace, but also there's respite care during the day where if I wanted to go someplace for the whole day, someone could come in and just be with him. And so that he's not alone, and if there's anything that needs to be done. And that's such an important part of taking care of yourself. And it's something that's also available to the care partners with the VA.
Yes, I think that's such a good point. And we often put receiving respite care off until we're already burned out. We're already at the end of our rope. So the idea is to take advantage of those things if they are available to you, like respite care, before you get to that point.
Yeah.
So I love hearing some of these things that you're doing. I will share that when I was caring for both my parents and my sister, acupuncture was also very helpful to me. I loved hearing you mention that. And so many great tips around that and things that caregivers can be doing for themselves. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's kind of a personal thing, and it's for everybody. We learn what fills us up, what keeps us going, what refreshes us, what helps us rest. And we need to be aware and conscious of that. So it sounds like you're really doing a good job of exploring all of that.
I have one other thing to say, if I may. One of them is practicing gratitude, however small it is at the end of the day, but really asking for help. You know, before Gary was discharged, I asked for things I never imagined I would ever ask for. I asked someone to take our comforter to the laundromat and wash it because it was too big for the washer. I mean, I asked someone to put together a shower stool. So many people did things for us that were truly amazing. A neighbor built a temporary ramp for Gary to get in on the wheelchair in case the lift wasn't installed in time. It was those kinds of things, but people want to help. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and put what you need to do for yourself on the calendar. Because what I learned is that if I didn't put on the calendar, we were scheduling appointments for Gary in there during my caregiver support group, and then I was missing it because I hadn't put that on the calendar. So it's really important to do that.
Do it if it's on there. Yeah, you and I are completely in line on these things. I love that you're sharing these. We do have some questions from the members of the ARP Family Caregivers discussion group. So if you don't mind, I'd love to move on to those because I really want to try and get some of those in, and we'll do a little bit of a rapid fire question and answer, okay? I'm going to start with Dr. Mantri. We had a question: do all people with Parkinson's develop dementia? Why is dementia associated with Parkinson's disease? And is there special help for care partners whose loved ones have Parkinson's and dementia?
Yeah, absolutely. Parkinson's and dementia often go together, but not always. I should say that first, right off the bat. Not everybody with Parkinson's gets dementia. A lot of people with Parkinson's, I would say probably the majority of people with Parkinson's, do have some trouble with thinking and memory, especially as the disease goes on. The most common things we see are trouble with multitasking or prioritizing or deciding in what order you need to do, different tasks for a day. People can get sort of stuck on one task and not be able to sort of shift gears and move on to the next thing that needs to happen, for instance. And there's a lot of ways that to help support people who are in that space. The first thing is that there are lots of really effective medicines to help with some of these thinking and memory issues in Parkinson's disease. And so it's important to talk with your clinician about medications. Either are there medicines that could help with this if we added them? And I think the equally important question is, are there medicines that you're taking or that your loved one is taking that are maybe making their thinking and memory worse? A lot of medicines that we use for Parkinson's and for other conditions can really cause people to get foggy or confused or uncertain. And so sometimes it's not so much about adding a medicine, it's more about looking to see what we can reduce or what we can take away. And then there's also a lot of support. Barbara, you mentioned how tremendously helpful occupational therapy was. Again, not just with helping people navigate physical spaces or symptoms, but occupational therapy can also be really, really helpful at helping people come up with sort of cognitive practices and cognitive load to help build up the skills that are working well and find ways to compensate for areas that are maybe not working quite so well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of both medication and non-medication ways to help address memory and thinking changes in Parkinson's.
Wonderful. Another following up with you, Dr. I'm sorry, Barbara, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Mantri, we also had some questions related to medications. Mm-hmm. And there are many medications used to manage Parkinson's symptoms, but we had a question specifically about, I may mess this up, carbidopa, levodopa as one of the that helps with movement symptoms. Are there different formulations of the drug, and how does it work?
Yeah, carbidopa levodopa is largely a mainstay of treatment for many, many people with Parkinson's disease. The way I think of it is dopamine replacement therapy. So that levodopa component gets converted by your brain into dopamine, which is the brain chemical that is missing in Parkinson's. So it's kind of like refilling your gas tank in your car. When it gets low, you take some levodopa and it goes back up. And just like with cars, everybody sort of needs a different amount of levodopa, if you will, both in terms of the number of doses per day, the type of levodopa, immediate release versus extended release. There are now some pump versions of levodopa that give an infusion all day long, kind of similar to how an insulin pump might work. Not exactly the same, but that's one way to think about it. And so, the dose and the timing and how much and how often, that's really a individualized decision with your clinical team. But, in addition to levodopa, there are lots of other medicines that can help manage or modulate or adjust sort of those dopamine levels in the brain. What we're hoping for as much as possible with any medicine is to try and keep your dopamine level as steady as we can all day long so that it's not going up and down. And so as that starts to happen, or if that happens, we often will recommend adjustments either to the type of medicine or the number of doses or what have you to try and keep things steady or as steady as possible.
Got it. I think that's one of the trickiest things is finding the exact thing that works for each individual person. And these medications are expensive sometimes. Are there resources to help people afford them? And what are the alternatives if they can't afford these medications?
Yeah, they can really be expensive, especially some of the newer formulations that might still be on patent. There's a lot of different resources that can help people with medications. Some drug companies will have, for instance, discount coupons. If you have commercial insurance, you can usually access those generally with Medicare or Medicaid or VA insurance. Those discount programs are not an option, but other options that I sometimes recommend to people are things like GoodRx. There are various online pharmacies that might have, different cheaper prices. And then the Parkinson's Foundation helpline is a really, really great resource here to reach out to and say, hey, my doctor recommended this medicine. It's really expensive. Are there, things that I can tap into to help with copay support or with other medication-related costs? And the helpline is really good at helping you find both nationally available resources, but also are there specific things in your community or in your state that could help lessen that cost out of pocket?
And I would add, if I could, if the person is a veteran and has a service-connected disability with Parkinson's, like Gary does, he was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, and he has a service-connected disability. He gets all of his medications for free at the VA.
Yeah, it's an amazing resource for veterans who have a service connection. Both, medications as well as different kinds of therapies can also be either completely covered or covered at a great discount through the VA.
Yes, and my dad did not have a service-related disability, but his medications were still free. He was a veteran who served during wartime and had independence benefits. But it's complicated, and never hesitate to ask at the VA. Never assume that you're not eligible for something.
Exactly.
So we have quite a few questions related to therapies and resources for people who are living with Parkinson's. So I'm going to throw these out. The two of you can answer. One family caregiver asked, would it be beneficial for my husband who has Parkinson's to have access to a dietitian? So how does food and nutrition, and how can a dietitian help? How does that affect Parkinson's?
Yeah, big question. There's lots and lots of emerging evidence around the role of diet and Parkinson's progression, the impact of diet on Parkinson's meds. I would say that it's always helpful, I think, to talk with a registered dietitian if you can, to just run through your diet and see are there changes you could make to help support brain health generally, and then Parkinson's specifically. What I often recommend to patients is to look at the Mediterranean diet as a guideline. So lots of fruits and vegetables, less red meat, cooking with olive oil, and so on. The one caution I'll often give with Mediterranean or other types of diet is that for some people, protein intake can interfere with the way that the carbidopa levodopa gets absorbed. So it doesn't happen to everybody, but if I've had patients notice that, when I take my medicines with a big meal, it doesn't work as well, or it doesn't feel like it kicks in as well. And so sometimes you either adjust the time of your meal or you adjust the time of your medicine to take it before you eat rather than after. So there can be a lot of tweaking and sort of playing around with some of this. And a dietitian can be very, very helpful at helping you narrow in on, this might not be the greatest thing to take together with your medication. So take it at a different time of day or switch to an alternative or something.
Great. We've talked a little bit off and on about physical therapists and occupational therapists. How can they help with the movement disorders?
Yeah. So I am very much a proponent of interprofessional care for people with Parkinson's disease. I think PT, physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy, or OT, are really the mainstays of treatment in a lot of ways, both in terms of helping people with their mobility. So for instance, physical therapy can help with gait and balance issues to reduce the risk of falls. The last thing anybody wants, I think, is to have a bad fall and you hurt yourself or break a bone. So early PT can be really helpful at that. Barbara, I know you mentioned the LSVT program. That is a wonderful program for Parkinson's. And there are others as well that PT can help people sort of learn those exercises and techniques that then ideally you keep doing at home, even after your official number of PT visits has ended. Speech therapy similarly can help people with projecting your voice, making sure that you're communicating well, that you're understood. Occupational therapy is great at helping people come up with different devices and different tools to make everyday activities easier and more natural. So, I mean, I am very much, you need to see not just me as the movement disorders doc. I'm really here as, the quarterback to help get you all of these other members of your care team on board. And those are the ones you'll be seeing and often doing a lot of work with, even between visits with your neurologist or with your primary clinician.
Yeah.
And I full disclosure, I have a bachelor's degree in music therapy. I started my career out as a music therapist. And I just want to throw in, I know that music therapy can also be extremely helpful for those with Parkinson's.
Yeah, if I can just add in there, at the World Parkinson's Congress this May in Phoenix, which is an amazing opportunity that brings together people with Parkinson's, care partners, researchers, clinicians. There's going to be a whole day on music, a talk on like music and movement and its impact on Parkinson's. So yes, it's very much a part of care.
I'll have to learn more about that. Yeah. Barbara, have you found physical therapy and all of these therapies you mentioned previously that they've been helpful? Do you see that being an increasingly important part of his treatment?
They're absolutely essential. And as I mentioned earlier, you may not use them all the time. And you may work with a speech therapist now, but then take a break. You may not need it for a while, or you might have swallowing difficulties and need to go back to a speech therapist or speech and language pathologist. And so it's part of the team that is always there that you can use at different stages in the progression of the illness. And I underline everything that Dr. Mantri said.
Yeah, I think, with the physical therapy in particular, if someone has a fall, time for some more physical therapy, I agree with you that it can be an off and on thing as needed, and not a one-time type of approach. I know we have a caregiver who brings up a really good point. And she says, I think it's very true especially for people living in rural areas. She says, we don't have many qualified professionals where we live. Is there anything else we can do if I can't, we don't have a physical therapist or a speech therapist or, some of these people right in our community? What else can they do?
Yeah, it can be a really big challenge for people living in rural areas. I think this is somewhere where, the Parkinson's Foundation can really step in a big way through that Health at Home program that I mentioned. The Fitness Fridays are, a physical therapist doing exercises that are targeted towards different components of Parkinson's. So you can either tune in live on Friday mornings, or there's this whole back catalog that we have on the website that you can review at your leisure, or to, hone in on like, hey, I'm having a little bit more trouble with balance right now. Let me watch some of the balance videos and learn some of these exercises that I can do at home to help with balance, for instance, or, speech exercises and so on. So I would really encourage everybody, no matter where you live, but particularly if you're in an area where you don't have ready access to a Parkinson's trained care team, to look into the Health at Home series on the Parkinson's Foundation's website.
Wonderful. And we will again share links for that in the comments below. I hate to do this, but we're going to have to wrap up because we are running out of time. But I wanted to ask, first of all, Barbara, can you share, one more bit of advice, one thing that family caregivers can do today that is supportive and helpful?
I think if you aren't already connected with a support system, with a support group, do it now. Don't wait. That's so important. And celebrate little victories. Remember joy and awe and laughter. You see our Christmas tree, that's up until Valentine's Day. A little joy that we have every day, a little light in our lives.
Yes, wonderful. I always say joy is our greatest survival skill. as caregivers. And I think as people in general, really is something that I learned through caregiving. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Dr. Mantri, just to reiterate again, I'm going to put the Parkinson's Foundation website on the screen. Tell us, how people can learn the best about, other webinars and other offerings from the Parkinson's Foundation.
Yeah, so the website is a fantastic resource. I would bookmark it and make it something that you check in on regularly, because we've got, weekly webinars, we've got expert briefings where we bring in, scientists and clinicians who are working on different topics to give you an overview of what Parkinson's care is like. We've got a coffee conversation series that I do with some of my colleagues where we tackle some of these big topics like, how do you deal with mood changes and depression in Parkinson's disease? How do you deal with physical symptoms? How do you deal with balance issues? And sort of break it down and answer viewers' questions. So, and you can sign up for all of those on the website. Once you're on our mailing list, you'll get those regular reminders for different events as they come up. And I'd also encourage you through the website to find, if you can, a Parkinson's Foundation event close to home. We do things like Moving Day, which is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to bring together people and do sort of a walk in support of Parkinson's disease, a big fundraiser, big, really fun activity. People bring their kids and there's sort of a carnival atmosphere. It's really wonderful. There's also Parkinson's Revolution, which is a series of spin classes supporting Parkinson's research and Parkinson's care. There's PD Generation, which is the largest genetic study of people with Parkinson's disease. And if you have Parkinson's, you can sign up online and do this home genetic testing kit and a visit with a genetic counselor, again, all from home, to give you a better understanding of your disease and the implications that may have for you and your family. So I really encourage everybody to, keep an eye on the Parkinson's Foundation website, parkinson.org. It's a really, really wonderful resource.
So many incredible resources that you have to share with Parkinson's care recipients and their care partners. I also point people to the ARP website, arp.org/caregiving, and we will both be sharing links directly to articles and resources specific to Parkinson's disease on both of our websites in the comments below, so be sure and check those out. Thank you both so much for taking the time to be with us here today. Dr. Mantri, thank you for sharing your professional and your great depth of medical knowledge. And Barbara, thank you so much for sharing your story. And please thank Gary for being open to you sharing your personal story, the two of you together.
Thank you.
This video will be available to watch for the next 30 days. So please share it with your friends and make sure that people get a chance to watch it. And if you're watching and you're not already a member of the ARP Family Caregivers Discussion Group on Facebook, please do join us in the group. Once again, thank you to all you caregivers and care partners out there. We really appreciate everything that you do. Bye-bye.